There, that should be better. Hello, everyone. My name is Allison, and I'm the Education and Outreach Manager here at Shaker Historical Society, coming at you live on Instagram and on Facebook Live. So if you aren't following us already, please make sure to go and follow us on both accounts at Shaker History and on Facebook at Shaker Historical Society. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the weaving process and the history of Shaker weaving and a little bit of a general history of weaving as a whole. So, is it not working? Hang on, I've noticed that there is an issue with the Instagram Live. Hopefully we can sort this out. Hi, Snail Barrier. Thank you for joining us. I think it's all coming across okay. If you can see this video, just give us a thumbs up in the chat, and we can keep going. We're having a bit of a technical issue at the moment. So, but again, we appreciate you guys joining us today and appreciate you being here. So thank you for hanging out with us. Okay. So I've got the signal that we're doing good now. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Snailberry, I appreciate you. So today, again, just going to reintroduce myself. I'm Allison Henline. I am the Education and Outreach Manager here at Shaker Historical Society in Shaker Heights, Ohio. And because of the crazy world that we're living in, we are going to be doing more of these virtual programs to kind of bring history to you. This is going to be a little bit of an interactive demonstration, and I'm going to be asking some questions, so feel free to comment as necessary or as you wish. There's just going to be a little bit of here and there, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history of weaving in the Shakers perspective and in historical perspective. So without further ado, the process of weaving is around 12,000 years old, so it's not a new concept, although it has had significant technological advances in obviously the more recent history of textile manufacturing. But the process has stayed relatively the same. You have the same sort of idea where you are weaving two pieces of material together to create a stronger bond, to create a textile or some sort of fabric or piece that you can utilize in a different way than you could those materials separately. It can also be decorative. It doesn't have to be just purely for, a garment. It could be for tableware. It could be for furniture. A variety of different uses have woven fabric upon them. But just a little bit about the history in Shaker Heights regarding weaving. I'm going to be talking primarily about the woolen mill, which I have a picture of here, if I can show you guys. Sorry, the Instagram camera is here and the Facebook camera is here. So I'm just going to be holding this up, but this is a photograph from our collection of the woolen mill on the side of Lee Road. So if you're familiar with Shaker Heights or Cleveland at all, sorry, my camera is like a weird white balancing thing. But this is the picture of the woolen mill that used to be on Lee Road. And it was at the intersection of South Park Boulevard and Lee Road, and it was just west of the Upper Shaker Lake, which is now known as Horseshoe Lake. So if you're ever in the area and you happen to be walking around, you can easily find the spot where it once was. This is an old photograph that has been taken from a glass plate negative that is in our collection. So I'm going to read a little bit of an excerpt from one of our old issues of the journal, which is a kind of an interesting, how do I want to say, it's like a newsletter from the museum. So in 1854, a brick bee house was built and work was started on a 3-story brick woolen mill on Lee Road and South Park Boulevard, which is this one. When completed, the largest brick building in the North Union housed not only milling, carding, and weaving, but also a cooperage shop, which is how they make barrels. The first floor was equipped with a wood lathe for turning broom handles for a thriving market. Yarn was manufactured on the upper floors where there were carding machines, spinning jacks, and many spindles. A twister and 2 power looms. So they did actually have a lot of these new technological advances that were a part of the weaving process that were going on during the Industrial Revolution. So it's important to recognize that the Shakers were living in Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is now known as Shaker Heights, Ohio, then Warrensville. It was all, they were using those technologies that were coming out at the time. So it might seem a little bit different to us today to think of those as technological advances, but a power loom is a very technologically advanced piece of machinery. Much of the wool that was produced here was used for stockings and mittens. Although Shakers were mostly self-sufficient, these products were a vital source of income for the colony. The machinery was driven by water power and supplied by an overshot wheel. So most of the woolen mills during this time period were water powered. So if you can imagine in your mind a building just like this, you don't even have to imagine it, we have a picture. If you can imagine a building just like this, there is a wheel that is housed within or outside that would power the different mechanisms inside of the technology or inside of the machinery within the mill. It's really fascinating stuff. I find it fascinating, of course, because I'm a bit of a history nerd. But it is quite an interesting piece of history that we have here in Northeast Ohio. So a little bit about what I'm going to be going into next is a little bit of a DIY project that you can do at home. I know that the holidays are among us. We are here. We are, about to celebrate Christmas, currently celebrating Hanukkah. And maybe you have somebody that you wanted to make something for, but you don't have the time, or you're waiting on shipping times or whatever. So I'm going to show you how to make something out of a cardboard piece of paper and some yarn. But before we get into that, I do have some historical stuff I wanted to share with everyone, just as a little behind the scenes from us. So we have this old shuttle, and it has markings on it to say the Schacht spindle, which was made in Boulder, Colorado, made in the USA. This is not necessarily a historical artifact. In fact, Schacht is still in business. They are still making various textile artifacts, ephemera. Not artifacts, ephemera. And this, we believe, is a shuttle. It is listed in our catalog as a shuttle. So as you can see, the yarn would be placed in the center, wrapped around, and then fed through the warp strings. And I will discuss a little bit about what warp strings are. So we actually found this in our collection in our attic. So this is a piece of, I believe, is just a woven piece, an end piece. I don't know if it was meant to be anything. This came off of a treadle loom, which is upstairs. It has, I think it's a double treadle. I wasn't able to get a good look at it. It's kind of hidden away. But as you can see, this is a very, I don't want to say like a very interesting pattern. There's a couple different patterns that you can notice on this. But these little yellow strings at the end, this is the warp strings. So these are often thinner than the weft, which runs, this is the green string in this case. So you have the warp strings, which are yellow, and the green strings, which are the weft. So the shuttle in this case, imagine this, would feed through the yellow strings to create these patterns. So this is a really cool piece. I don't know how old this is. It was just kind of laying around upstairs. I don't think it was meant to be an artifact, but it is pretty cool to kind of see how people used to use the looms that we have. Next up, we have a more traditional, this is what I'm used to using for a shuttle. Typically, though, shuttles won't have like these open ends. They'll have like kind of a rounded end or maybe even a pointy end so that you can just weave in between. But when you're using a tabletop loom or a proper loom, you can just feed these right through and you can just beat it down with the beater. A couple other interesting tidbits that we found. This is becoming more of a show and tell, I guess, than a DIY, but I promise you the DIY is coming. So this is a drop spindle. I don't know how old this one is. It doesn't have any markings to kind of tell me how old it is, but I can tell that it was handmade by someone because you can see on the bottom, I don't know how close I can get to show you guys these, but on the bottom it looks like it's just a drawer handle that somebody drilled through the center and put this on. It's very, I think this was a DIY project that somebody else had made, but essentially what you would do is you would take wool or any other sort of fiber and bring it around the side and spin it up, and then you would wind on the excess on the bottom. So kind of cool. It's a very rudimentary way of making yarn, but it still works and it's still done today. This we found today also doesn't have any sort of information with it, but we have reason to believe that this is a knitting loom. Different type of loom, same sort of process. So if you've ever seen, we actually got these for a different Shaker Make It's project this year. These sort of pot holder looms, if you've ever seen these, they're really popular with kids. You can make your own little pot holders or your own little, what are they called? They're to make sure that you don't burn your table when you set a hot pot down, which I always call them pot holders. This is a regular pot holder loom, and then we believe that this is kind of a similar aspect, maybe not to make pot holders, but maybe to make something else, like a stocking or maybe a hat. Seems a bit like a hat size, but it would be kind of hard to make a square hat, I feel. I don't know how that would work out on your head, but this was also in our collection in our attic, which I find really fascinating. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the DIY aspect here. So if you want to follow along, I encourage you to. All you're going to need is some yarn. I recommend 2 different colors, especially if this is your first time doing something like this. So I have a couple different things here, but I tried to get contrasting colors so that way I could see what I was doing and I could show you a little bit easier how to do this on your own. So here we've got a light blue, kind of a cyan color, and a maroon. And then I also have some cotton string. You don't need cotton string. I just happen to have some at my house, but twine also works well. Kitchen twine works well. This is the warp. So I always try to use a thinner sort of yarn or sort of material as my warp strings, because you're not really going to see them, and it's something that I just like to hide. So this bright red color is probably going to be my warp today, but we'll see. And you're going to need a piece of cardboard. I butchered a box to get this piece of cardboard today. This is roughly around 8 inches, 8.5 inches, 9 inches. I do have a ruler with me. I could probably measure it real quick. Yeah, it's around 8.5 inches by, let's see, right around 8 inches. So it's not perfectly square. It doesn't have to be. You just have to have 2 sides that are relatively flat. So I encourage you to, if you want to do this at home, use the edge of the box, so a corner. I used a corner here, and just cut out the length that you wish to use. So I already have an example here to show you kind of what the finished product is. So this is my finished product that I had made prior to this stream, so I could show you guys exactly how to do this or what it looks like. This was my first attempt at doing this on a DIY loom, so it looks a little bit funky, but hopefully, you know, we can make something else cool today. I'm not going to be doing a full process because this took me around, I would say around 4 to 5 hours of just sitting there and just like mindlessly weaving. But I can show you how to get started and how to finish it off too, because I have one that's already done and I have one that I'm about to start. Without further ado, what you're going to need is your piece of cardboard. So the first thing you're going to start out with is the ruler, like I had mentioned, in your piece of cardboard. So with this piece of cardboard, I had already pre-measured with the ruler every centimeter on the one side. So it doesn't matter which side you want to work with. This is just your temporary loom. It's not going to live here forever. It can live here forever if you want it to, but I personally will be taking mine off. So I don't know if you can see, but I marked on here with pen every centimeter to make sure that I had an equal warp space. So now I'm going to take some scissors and just cut every centimeter, and you want it to kind of go in a little bit further, especially if you're using a thicker yarn as your warp strings, because you're going to be putting some tension on this loom. So you want to make sure that it can handle it and it's not going to crack or it's not going to bend or break. So I recommend kind of, I think it's like a half inch in. Just kind of, it kind of reminds me, if you've ever seen like I always remember like the babysitters or the dog sitters would hang up around town little call me if you need a babysitter sort of thing. You can tear off the number and call them. Like that sort of idea. You're going to be making some of those fringy sort of cuts. But they don't have to be super perfect because it's going to be more rustic in nature. So there's one side done. Now you need to do this on the opposite side too. So I'm going to do that. And if you have any questions during this process, or you want any more information on weaving in general or on shakers weaving, feel free to comment and I'll do my best to answer your question. I'm by no means an expert in textiles, but I can point you in the right direction to get you some more information. So this is also a really fun activity to do with kids. If you have any children, or maybe they're getting a little bored and you have a bunch of Amazon boxes stacking up, this is a good way to put them to use. So now that I've made all those cuts along the top and the bottom of my DIY cardboard loom, I'm going to warp my loom. So this is what I would consider a DIY tapestry loom, which is what I've written in the description today. So if you wanted to make a bigger project, you're going to need a proper loom, but today I think I'm going to be making just like a small little coaster. I think that's probably the right size for this. Just make like something fun. So I'm going to use this as my warp string today, which I normally wouldn't use a thick yarn like this, but you want to give yourself probably like a couple arms length to work with at first. And what you're going to end up doing is around your first peg, or what we're going to consider the peg up here at the top, you're just going to tie it in a loop. So just double knot it. Just a simple double knot like that, if you can see that. And then what you're going to do is pull it down. I'm going to hold it like this. Pull it down and then go around the bottom in a U shape and come back up. So you can see here, that's one warp or two warp stringed. And on the back, it should kind of look like this. So you're doing it kind of like interstitching it. You don't have to go all the way around. I find that to be a little bit more cumbersome to do. And you get just as good tension doing it this way than you would doing it on the back too. So there's another one. So it should kind of look like almost a sewing stitch at the bottom, but you're just hooking it. So you're just hooking it around the bottom. And then coming back around. And you're going to do this for all of your warp strings that you wish to weave. So I'm going to do this whole thing just because I can. And I have the time to do it. But depending on the size of your project, I always allow for shrinkage. So this is another thing. If you are any sort of fabric or sewing person, you know to allow for a little bit of shrinkage in your work. Just like a seam allowance sort of thing when sewing. So I always allot for, at least when I'm doing it like this, a DIY project like this, I would allow almost up to a 1/2 inch of shrink. So just be aware of that when you start putting the weft into the warp, there will be some shrinking. Oh, I can tell I didn't cut these properly, but it's fine. Okay, so I have an extra warp string. So when you've warped your loom, it should look a little bit like this, kind of like you've just made a little jail cell. On the back, it should look like this. You shouldn't really have too many. Oh, I think I went around the last two. My bad. Here, a lot about weaving is unweaving too. So don't be afraid to unweave if you make a mistake. There we go. I kind of went into autopilot there. I did it again. Okay. So when you're on your last peg at the top, there is a possibility that you'll have extra pegs on the bottom like I do. So I have extra pegs right here. All you have to do is tie it off. So I'm going to loop it around. So just loop it around that peg. and then loop it again, and then I'm going to cut it. And then I just bought a cheap plastic embroidery needle. You can buy these at Walmart for $1, I think. I think they come in a pack of 2, or they should, because I can almost guarantee that you will lose one. I lost one and I had 2 in a pack, so it's just kind of the nature of the beast. So you're going to have a little tail at the end. You can do one of 2 things with it. You can tuck it in or you can cut it off. I'm just going to kind of tuck it in, I think, with my embroidery needle. Just going to feed the yarn through and just tuck it through the back. Just like that. So that way it's going to hang down a little bit, but I'm going to cut this off as well, just so it's not as long and it doesn't bother me when I'm leaving. So here you have your warped loom. So this is your warped tapestry loom. If you wanted to save this video and rewatch it, you can watch it as many times as your heart desires. This video is not going anywhere. It'll be here forever. So if you missed something or if you missed a step, just replay this video as many times as you need and it will be here for you. Okay, so moving forward. Sorry, I had a notification. We are going to figure out what our weft is going to be for this. If you wanted to do a design, so this is just a simple design I was playing with. It's by no means perfect. It is just an example that I made for this, and this was also my first time making a DIY loom. This is just simple triangles, simple shapes. More pointy shapes worked better, so triangles, squares, rectangles. If you wanted to include anything like that, those typically work better for these smaller projects. If you wanted to do a fancier sort of style, there are plenty of YouTube videos out there on how to do different weaving stitches. I personally recommend one of my favorite YouTube channels for weaving is the Spruce and Linen channel on YouTube. They have a great sort of selection of different projects you can do, but we are not affiliated with them. I just personally prefer to use that site. This is my first attempt at doing this, so it's not perfect, but it's mine. And today I'm going to be using the maroon string to show you some contrast between the warp and the weft. So this is a brand new ball of maroon yarn. It's just acrylic yarn, doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I'm just going to take roughly a couple of arm lengths to start out with. Almost lost my knitting or my embroidery needle again. And what you're going to do is you're going to thread your needle. You don't have to have an embroidery needle. It could be, I've seen people use a popsicle stick. I've seen people just not need any sort of shuttle device, but I can tell you right now you're going to wish you had one, because after doing one thing, you're going to be like, this is going to take me forever. I've also used a paper clip. A paper clip would work too if you are in a pinch. So now that we have our extraordinarily long weft strings, which would be this, we're going to start weaving. So to do a couple rows of plain weave on whichever you want to be the top or the bottom, I'm just going to start at the bottom here where like the barcode is on the cardboard, just because that's easier for my eyes to orientate. And what you're going to do is you're going to go over and under. So I'm going to kind of give you like a weird perspective here, but it's exactly as you would imagine it, just over and under. And you might have to stop to kind of like feed it back through. You're just going to pull it all the way to kind of the end. You're going to leave a little bit of a tail. I always leave a little bit of a tail. So I left maybe 2 inches, 3 inches of a tail here, and that is going to be good enough just to kind of keep. You want a tail when you start. Any new strand that you start, you want to leave a little bit of a tail. You can tuck that in afterwards to make it a little bit more seamless on the edges. So there we have our first woven strand, everyone. How cool is that? And you can do this all at home. I think all of the supplies that I bought for this is less than $5, because you have the cardboard boxes already, the scissors I already had, the ruler I already had, the pen I had. I just had to buy some yarn, and I bought this yarn on clearance for $2.50. So you can definitely do this. It's very cheap, it's very easy, and it's a good way to get into something, especially around the holidays, just to sit down and unwind and maybe watch a movie or watch your favorite TV show or listen to a book or your favorite music, whatever you like, just to kind of zen out and enjoy a mindless activity, or mindful activity, not mindless. So now I'm just going back the way I came. I'm just pulling the warp string through. And it's important that you don't pull too tightly when it gets to the end here. So this is the end. So just pull a little bit. And then you're going to have sort of a weird situation here. All you're going to do is just push this down with your fingers. I just use my fingernails. I'm sorry if that annoys anybody with the scratching. You can also use a comb if you have like a wide tooth comb. And then you just push it down to meet the other one, and there you have it. Now you have 2 rows. All right, I'm going to do a couple more rows and talk a little bit more about weaving history. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to comment them. I'm here to help you. I know that everyone probably wasn't expecting to, make this right now, right this second. So if that is the case, you're, like I said, welcome to come back and revisit this video. This video is not going anywhere. It just happens to be live right now. But the history of weaving is pretty cool. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, weaving has been around for nearly 12,000 years, approximately 12,000 years. Started around the Neolithic era, and it has transformed a lot over those 12,000 years. And now we have a lot of different synthetic materials that are woven. We have a lot of different mechanisms and how to weave, different designs, different sort of like what we want out of it. So for this project, because I'm just demonstrating, I don't actually have an idea in mind. I kind of think I want to make a coaster or some sort of wall hanging. This might be like a cute little 8x8 or maybe even a 6x6 tapestry to hang up in my office. That'd be kind of cute, or my home office rather. But these are just some basics to get you started. If you wish to continue with it, I implore you to. Hopefully when everything goes back to whatever the normal is, or whatever, life is going to be after this, we can host some weaving workshops at the museum and show you a little bit of a less DIY loom situation, but maybe even offer some loom or some weaving classes too. But I always find weaving to be very relaxing. It's a very quick process. It doesn't necessarily take, I find, although I am a knitter, I am not a crocheter. I've tried so hard to crochet. It is just not in my forte. I also like to sew and do embroidery, but I find weaving to just be one of those activities where I can just sit and not have to think about anything. I just kind of plug along at it and see where it takes me. It's also very quick. So I think I've only been doing this for a couple minutes and I've already got like a pretty solid pattern here. So this is just a basic weave, just an over and under. So it's not necessarily a fancy pattern, kind of like this one would be, where you can see like it's almost got like a chevron pattern. This is not as fancy as that, but there are different stitches that you can do on a tapestry loom, but for today's sake I'm just going to be doing some plain weave. So you might be thinking, well, Allison, this looks great. I'm really encouraged now to go out and make my own DIY loom. But how do I know when it's finished? How do I get it off the loom? Because I don't want to hang a piece of cardboard on my wall, or I don't want to give a piece of cardboard to, my family member or my friend. How do I preserve this beautiful piece of art that I'm going to be making? Well, remember this guy. So this is the one that I had already finished. I did put so this is a pro tip that I figured out when I was about halfway through this piece. I ended up cutting up additional pieces of cardboard just to shove underneath my warp strings to give it a little bit more tension. So the way I did this was I just started piling them underneath, so that way I could feed my shuttle or my embroidery needle just straight through. So it makes it easier to pick up the strings and move it along. So let me just shove these under here, like so. So another cardboard box, the same cardboard box that you butchered for this little tapestry loom, you can also butcher for a little piece to weave with. And then here's our finished product. What you're going to do is you can do one of two things. You can either tie the warp strings together at the top, which is going to be a little bit difficult simply because we've done an interesting technological thing with this where we've tied the warp strings on the tops and the bottoms. So right now what you're going to do is you're going to fold your project, your loom, in a little bit just to get the strings off. You should have these wonderful little loops. So these little green loops. I don't know if you can see that very well. I'm not doing a great job at my camera work today. I apologize. You're just going to kind of shimmy them off of the tops here. Okay, now that we have freed our little piece of woven fabric from its cardboard prison on the top, just kind of pull it off the bottom. Now the bottom should probably just be fine as it is. It should just stay like that because of the technique that we used. So it's already kind of interwoven at the bottom, if you can kind of see that. But if you wanted added security, what you could do is, so I will show you for the sake of the tutorial. You're going to take a piece of yarn, hopefully the one that matches whichever end color that you ended or started your project with. This will not match, which might be good because you can see the contrast. And what you're going to do is kind of sew up the edge of your project so it doesn't fray. Now I'm going to just kind of leave this as is because I am going to be taking this out anyways, but you just do a simple little stitch kind of along to make like a little hoop at the bottom. Now at the top, you can either do the same thing where you stitch it, or you can just tie these together. I will probably leave it just as this and feed a stick from a tree through these loops and just hang it up on my office wall just like this. But if you wanted it to be a flat piece of fabric, maybe as a very tiny placemat or a very large coaster, I would just suggest tying the ends off, and then that way you will have a finished piece of fabric. But that is kind of it. That's how you make your own DIY cardboard loom. If you have any sort of problems with it, please feel free to email me at education@shakerhistory.org. And if you want to get any more information or have any issues or questions or concerns about anything that I talked about today, please feel free to email me again. That is education@shakerhistory.org. I will put it in the chat afterwards. And if you end up doing this DIY project and you make something really cool or really awesome, please feel free to send us a picture, again at the same email address, or tag us on social media, Instagram or Facebook @shakerhistory or #shakerhistory, and we will find it, and it'll just be really cool to share our projects together. So I hope that when you guys see this video, if you're watching it live or if you're watching it a couple days from now, I hope you got something from this, and I hope that we see you on the next Educator's Corner. And let us know in the comments below if you would like to see anything else talked about in the Educator's Corner and any sort of DIY projects that you would like to also make alongside us. So that is it from me, and thank you for being here. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and happy holidays.